The corridors of the Saturn XI, a galactic scouting ship traveling through the vastness of space, hummed faintly, a sound more felt than heard, like the pulse of some massive creature in eternal slumber. Beyond the thick plated windows, an endless field of stars stretched, cold and indifferent. Inside, X-12 walked alone, his boots tapping against the metal floor in a rhythm that seemed almost cheerful, but no one was there to hear it. He paused in front of a console, fingers moving over switches and dials, his face unreadable. 30 years had stripped away the novelty of the ship's functions. He didn't need to think about them anymore, just as he didn't need to think about his life, neatly divided into cycles. Life here wasn't about why, it was about how. The ship's lights flickered, dimming slightly. He muttered something under his breath, a joke aimed at no one. It wasn't funny, but the sound of his voice helped fill the emptiness. For now, as he moved deeper into the ship, the corridor changed. The sterile white walls gave way to glass panels, each one housing a pod. Inside each pod, a body floated, curled like a fetus, connected to tubes and wires. The clones, his siblings, his replacements. Each face was his, yet not quite. Subtly different jawlines, slight variations in skin tone, eyes that tilted just a little too far or not far enough. He stopped before one labeled EX-13. His reflection overlapped with the figure suspended within the viscous fluid. This one looked younger, softer somehow. He pressed a hand to the glass, leaving a faint smudge on its cold surface. "Lucky you," he murmured, though his voice carried no weight of sincerity. "You get 30 years of this. 30 years. That was how long it took for the engineered body to degrade, to reach the edge of its utility. His own body had started to falter, fingers that trembled at odd moments, joints that ached when they shouldn't. The ship's automated systems had subtly reminded him of his impending expiration for weeks now. Flashing lights on the consoles, periodic warnings on screens. There was no escaping it. He entered a side room, bare except for a small metal cabinet. Opening it, he pulled out a marker, its black ink permanent. He shook it once, twice, then strode back to X-13's pod. Tradition, he thought. No one had ever told him why, but the act had been etched into his mind since he'd first emerged from his own pod, a newly activated X-12. He remembered the smudged marker lines on his face, the crude doodles, the word idiot scrawled across his forehead. It had been his first contact, his first proof that someone else had touched him. He uncapped the marker and leaned in close to the glass. "Let's see," he said softly, his tone almost playful. "What do we go with this time?" He began with a pair of horns on X-13's forehead, then added a crooked mustache beneath the serene, closed mouth. Words came next, written in quick, jagged letters. Loser, meathead, try harder. A heart with an arrow through it followed, its message beneath reading, "Nice try, buddy." When he finished, he stepped back, studying his work with a tilt of his head. "You'll hate it," he said aloud, though there was no one to hear. "But you don't mess with tradition." X-13 stirred faintly in the pod, a programmed reflex that signaled the imminent awakening. The sight of it, a small twitch of fingers, a flutter behind closed lids, made something twist in X-12's chest. He capped the marker and set it down with a slow, deliberate motion. "It's not personal," he said, his voice quieter now. "You'll understand." The lights above brightened slightly, a soft chime echoing through the corridor. The ship knew what came next, even if it couldn't feel the weight of it. X-12 lingered, his gaze fixed on the clone's face, now a canvas of humor and insult. He pressed a hand to the glass again, this time leaving it there a little longer. Then he turned to leave, but a voice, low, rasping, unfamiliar, stopped him. "Tradition," it croaked, with a flicker of recognition that should have been impossible. X-12 froze, his breath catching. X-13's eyes opened.